Hi, I'm Claire Milliken and welcome to Art This Week. In this week's episode, we continue our series based on Texas-New York connections. Here we visit the incredible studio of Greenwich Village-based artist Mary Beth Edelson. Edelson recently had a show at the McKinney Avenue Contemporary in late 2010, titled There's Never Only One Game in Town. In Texas, she is represented by Deborah Colton Gallery. In this, our second of two episodes with her, we walk through her studio to talk about her current work. Now for Art This Week.
Okay, so what you're seeing in the studio now are they're collages, they're handmade collages, and they are backed on with canvas, and they're hot glued in the hot press, and so they stay that way. Some of them are 40 years old. People ask me about, okay, will this last forever? Mm-hmm. And I started to do, the reason they're 40 years old is I started to do them at the same time I was doing the Last Supper poster. And that was what inspired me to start doing collage work, is that I had all these pieces left over from the posters that were scattered around, and that was because it was pre-computer days. So nothing was being done by computer, but by hand. So when I was cutting out these images for the Last Supper and pasting them in place, then I would take those pieces that were left over and make other small collage works. And I just did them for fun and tossed them in a drawer. A couple of years later, I ran into them and I thought, these are kind of interesting. I think I'll make a few more of these. And that went on for the next 40 years.
And now we have this.
I just kept making them. You know, I wouldn't make them all at one time. I would make a batch, and then I would be doing other work, and then I'd come back to them and make another batch. But I literally have a couple of thousand of them now. What's on the wall now is not positioned exactly the way I would do it in a gallery setting. I put them up on the wall this way because I wanted to be able to see everything at one time in order to design something else. Mm-hmm. The problem with working with collage is it's a lot of little pieces and you have to see everything at once. And you can't see it because it piles up. Mm-hmm. So I thought, all right, if I put them all on the wall, then I'll be able to decide what to do a little easier. So it's kind of like a checklist, basically.
Yeah.
But these first ones that are on this side of the wall have to do very directly with the Last Supper, because here are some of the images of the women that are on the Last Supper posters. And I cut them out from the poster and then reconfigured them. And I began to think of these as plates or as platforms. And platforms in the sense that this is another taking off point for explaining and talking about what was going on within the culture at the time I was doing this. And for me, what was going on was the feminist movement. And the women that were working together and creating a community and creating magazines and creating exhibitions and programs in their community. And these are records of this kind of activity. And also, it's kind of like a little love letter to these women, because I feel that the women who really stuck their necks out originally, a lot of them, people tried to chop them off, the heads off. And it was very difficult for us initially. The culture didn't want what we were doing, and the culture is good at punishing people who do things that they don't want done. And that's what we had to put up with. So these are love letters to these women, in a sense, saying, thank you for being so courageous. Yeah. Thank you for what you did, and honoring them in that sense. So these are various versions of that kind of thing. Now, on the wall, you jump from something that I did in the 70s, and this is a very recent piece in which I took Leonardo da Vinci's famous image of Venus, and began trying to reinterpret that in a number of different ways. And I thought of her, I began thinking of her in different ways, especially in connection with nature. And in this case, I began to think of the psychological effects on women of various kinds of things that we have to go through. So we have a kind of madness about somebody with 3 eyes. It's like being sliced up and put back together. And yes, that, you could kind of interpret that as you will.
That's very striking.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
I like the fact that you could recognize who it is, and then you have this other thing going on with it.
Yeah.
So it forces you to reinterpret her in another way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then some of the very early ones that I did were really small pieces, because I didn't really take them seriously myself when I was doing them. They were just being done for fun. And so I did a lot of little ones, and
yeah, there's definitely a lot of humor in these.
yeah, there's a lot of humor in them.
His
Yes,
eyes are funny.
yeah, there's definitely a lot of humor. That I hope is in all of my work.
Oh yeah.
This one, like for example, I made about 40 of these, and they're called Yoko flakes, and I would just put them down. Just look like flakes coming down from wherever.
They're like cereal.
Yeah.
These bird-like
Yeah, this bird's
are so gorgeous. They're so striking. I remember a lot of these being at the MAC.
These were at the MAC. I don't have them placed very well on this wall, actually. Then we had the birds up there that we had at the MAC.
Yes.
And then here's another group of birds that are attached to this very ancient Egyptian eye goddess, who is also a bird goddess, which I have used over and over again. And then there's also, this one is a Syrian one, although the fact that I made them the same color makes them look like they're closer to each other than they are. But this one has like a snake wrapped around her. And I think that Fritz Lang, in his one of his well-known films, Metropolis. I think he got the idea for that swirling thing that he uses in the figures in that film from this early Syrian goddess, snake goddess. And I also find it to be, I'd like to do a huge glass piece of this. I think would be really interesting to do.
I love your use of ancient art historical imagery. I mean, it's just so exciting to me. This reminds me, I saw this immediately and I thought of a wailing woman, which is a common trope in actual Greek art.
Yeah.
And it's funny because they always show women wailing.
Yeah.
I mean, they're either wailing, fleeing from something, crying, screaming. So that's.
But this one I interpret differently. I interpret this one like this, and she's calling people, she's calling them to worship, or she's calling them to her, or I think in some of the northern, like Viking areas, she's calling them to war. As long as she stands there with her arms up, the soldiers can make war. Not a very good. So sometimes they have found things that support their arms to hold them up, like crutches.
Oh,
They're
wow.
But now that's more of a Northern European tradition.
It's really striking.
So they had, and then this is the Babot figure. Her body is headless if you look at it one way. She has legs and she has a head, and then she has a crown. Now another way to see it is that this is her head, and then she has, and that this is her skirt, and she has pulled her skirt up. Babo was a consort of the goddess Demeter, and she's credited for making Demeter laugh by she was a trickster, a kind of a trickster figure who would go around, cracking, doing jokes, doing funny things. But what she did that was funny was to pick up her skirt and reveal her pudenda. Now, there had to be something about her pudenda that was especially funny. This is my theory. And my theory is that she had a little penis. And so in this one, you pick up the flap and you see the vagina. But there are other ones you pick up the flap and you see a little penis.
That's awesome. That's too good.
Yeah, there's so
Oh, there's the other one.
And then this particular wall are cameos that are in particular pointing out women and featuring them. This is Nancy Spiro, and let's see who you would not recognize. Well, that one's me. Joyce Kozloff, Lucy Lepard.
When did you make these?
These were made over, from the 70s forward.
I remember these two, Mary Beth.
Yeah, I really like these Buddha figures. I have so much fun with them. One of the things that I do if I'm having a big exhibition, I do something really silly in it.
Yeah.
And these are really silly.
I love that.
Yeah. We were talking a little bit earlier about how exactly do I market these things, these collages, because I don't want to sell them as individual pieces because they're, I don't know, it just doesn't work. It doesn't give them their full breadth.
Right, context.
And context, and yes, context is the right word, without seeing more of them. So what I did for the show that I had at Acole Griffin not too long ago, I had a piece that was assembled that was sort of this kind of thing, and it became like a tableau, like you're reading these figures. I didn't have this coming off of it, the one at their gallery, but then I began to think, okay, that's one way to say, okay, this is one piece, and I'm also thinking of the possibility of, with watercolor, just making a circle or some kind of configuration around them and letting the watercolor just sort of drip and have a very casual frame in that way around it. And I haven't tried to do that yet, but I think that might be interesting.
Well, on that note, could you maybe speak about sort of the materiality of these? Are these photocopies or?
They are photocopies. I'm using archival paper, but they're going through a regular digital photocopy machine, and I have to search the city to find one that's working really well and that takes the paper I want to use and so forth. Yeah, and then and when they're backed with a Muslim, they are ready to go for a long time.
That's
I mean,
awesome.
some of them are 40 years old. You wouldn't be able to pick out which ones are 40 and which ones are not.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's
they hold up really well.
Yeah,
And they also are very
important.
easy to transport.
Yeah.
When I was exhibiting a lot in Europe, I became aware of the cost to museums of shipping things. And I knew that they appreciated very much if I had things that were easy to ship.
Yeah, oh man, I know all too well about that at the MAC.
So these are obviously, you can fill up an entire room and it'll be a box about like this.
It's too good. Yeah, no, it's a dream. It's a as a gallery worker. It's
open
a dream.
it up and.
Yep.
The other thing that I started using, I don't have out to show you, that when I was in the 90s, is working on chiffon fabric, and the chiffon also is very easy to. You can just literally roll it up and stick it in your pocket. But I was making images of women with guns in their hands at that time, and movie stars, because I became interested in how the gun in films in a woman's hand, how it changed with the period and how it reflected the political period in relationship to the amount of freedom or lack of freedom that they would give to women was reflected in those films, and the use of the gun was a very, very strong indicator of what was going on in the culture. An example of that would be films that were Western films. You would see the woman had a gun, and she'd have a very big gun. It would be like a rifle, but she was not using it for, she was using it basically to defend the homestead, the children, the husband. You know, or usually you assume the husband is gone, and but it's for in the name of something else. And the first time you really see women use it in a different way in the film noir, where women had more agency, but they always got severely punished for having taken up the film, taken the gun, which is obviously the phallic symbol of male power. So she's taken that power within this other context, and in another kind of use of the gun then came when you got Thelma and Louise, and that was one of the first times where you saw a more liberated use for women, but they got punished in the end. They got killed in the end.
Yeah,
there.
did.
The film that I really glommed onto was Gloria, with Gena Rowlands in it, and in that film she took on the mob. She had a gun, she took on the mob, she got by with it. She had to go to the mob in effect and sort of make her apologies to the mob, but she got away alive. So I use that film quite often as a reference point, and especially the image of Gena Rowlands pointing a gun. And I had that printed on bed sheets, and it became then a statement about domestic violence. Wow. And that the bed sheets were shown.
That's
far
really powerful. Wow, that's intense.
Now we jump to something really different than the wall collages, and these are photographs that I did in the 70s of my naked body in nature, and then I took them back to the studio and I collaged on top of them, or I drew on top of them, and I made about 40 different photographs like this, and these have literally also been photographed and reproduced around the world. Yeah. And the show that I had, I also had a show at one in Paris and one in New York last fall, and I showed these works in New York, and in the show in Paris, I exhibited work that I made in the early 90s that no one would touch when I made it, and it was about Lorena Bobbitt. Do you remember who Lorena Bobbitt is? She was the woman who cut off her husband's penis.
Oh, and did she throw it out the car? Yes, I know this woman. That's what that show is about?
The whole show was about that. And it's really a good show. It's a beautiful show, because she was a good-looking woman, and I made these silk screens of her, and huge, and it just looks like a good-looking woman when you come in and you see this, so you don't know who she is or what her background is. But then I also had about 80 other drawings that I did that were more specific to the case, and again, I treated it with humor. It was just funny.
Yeah, I mean,
it's in the end, that's the way even the people who were the actors treated it that way.
Well, Mary Beth, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
My pleasure.
It was an incredible experience. I mean, just being here and listening to you speak about your work and your life.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We want to thank Mary Beth for speaking with us. More information on her can be found at marybeth.edelson.com. In Houston, she is represented by Deborah Colton Gallery at deborahcoltongallery.com. In New York, she is represented by Acola Griffin Gallery, and they can be found at acolagriffin.com. We want to thank the McKinney Avenue Contemporary for setting up this studio visit. More information on them and the exhibition she had there, go to the-mac.org. That's it for Art This Week. Thanks for watching.
Fritz Lang, in his well-known, one of his well-known films called Metropolitan, Metropole. Metropolis.
Oh, Metropolis.
Metropolis. I know if I throw out enough clues, somebody will
Yeah, right.
Metropolis.